cope with those feelings?
You know, I've heard from survivors everywhere who have a different reaction to that, and it's horrible and heart-wrenching. In my case, to be completely honest with you, I hated myself so much, and I was so mad at myself that I didn't care if he found me. I really felt that if he did find me again, that I deserved it. That's how I dealt with it. It's not a good feeling to not like yourself. I've heard from other survivors who fear for their lives, who can't leave their home. And my goodness, I mean, you can only imagine what that feels like. And that's what's, to me, so wonderful about meeting other survivors is there's just so much to learn, because we all have different life experiences. Mm-hmm. We all come from different backgrounds, and each of our experiences are different depending on where our life is, and so many different things. And really bringing all our stories together helps us all heal. Mm-hmm. Because when I hear from other survivors who have a different coping mechanism or perhaps saw things in a different way that I did, it gives me strength. It allows me to process my own pain and grief in a way that perhaps I was doing wrong for so long.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So when you talk about, it is very interesting. I want to go back to that piece where you said that you were so angry with yourself that you almost were not fearful of him coming back to you. So you were kind of absolved of fear, having this anger towards yourself.
Correct.
How did you eliminate that anger and come to a self-peace that you have now?
You know, it's interesting. I wish I could say that, 24 hours a day I feel great. I still have moments. I still struggle. I find, for me personally, sharing my story has been very cathartic. I learn about myself more every day. Every time I share my story, I'm really grateful that I have a new perspective on myself. I'm really fortunate. I wish I can only hope other survivors end up with the same kind of family support, friend support that I have around me. I'm really fortunate to have that. I have a great partner who is supportive. My mother is extremely supportive. So that has really been really a great part of my healing. I meditate as much as I can, not as much as I should. I really, talking to other survivors, and, I get a sense of not only closure, but a sense of unity when I hear so many other stories from men and women who have gone through something similar, and we can kind of rely on each other and almost like poke fun at each other, because mm-hmm. I do still have those days where I'm just a mess. I get up every day because, I know there are so many others out there, and we're all fighting together. We're all part of this great team.
Yes. Well, this is a good time for a break, and thank you for sharing your story with us. This is Your Family's Health, and we're speaking to Natasha about her book, A Survivor's Journey from Victim to Advocate. Stay tuned. We're going to talk more about this great book after this short break.
An important message from Medicare. Between your doctor visits, taking the right medications at the right times, and following advice from different doctors, managing 2 or more chronic conditions like high blood pressure, arthritis, or diabetes can be overwhelming. But it doesn't have to be. Chronic Care Management Services can help you get the connected care you need by connecting the dots between your medical appointments, pharmacy, and hospital visits. Your doctor will work with you to create a care plan and check in with you between visits, keeping you on track and helping you with your health goals so you can spend more time doing what you love. If you have Medicare, ask your doctor about Chronic Care Management Services and get the connected care you need. For more information, visit Medicare.gov and search for Chronic Care Management.
Paid for by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.
Welcome back to Your Family's Health. This is Dr. Jeanine Cook-Garard, and I'm here with Natasha talking about her book, Our Survivor's Journey from Victim to Advocate. Welcome back, Natasha. Thank you for sharing a very wonderful book and talking about your experience, your lived experience of being violently assaulted in New York City in 1993. And as you may know, and as we all are aware of, that obviously this book was written before the current Time Up and Me Too movement. How do you say that this book and your experience ties into what's happening now in the media with regard to the Me Too movement?
Well, the Me Too movement has been going on for so long, and I'm glad it is finally getting credit, because survivors across the nation, across the world, have been speaking loudly, and I'm just really fortunate that the media has finally decided to make a point of bringing this forward so that others can, hear that this is something that happens so very often. I was just so inspired by so many survivors out there, and I'm really fortunate that I get to speak at college campuses.
Yeah.
And I'd often get up and speak, and I have a finite amount of time, but right afterwards I'd have students lined up asking me some really personal questions, which I thought was great, because those were questions I would have had as well. So I thought it was important to be able to share my journey in as honest as I could make it. And unfortunately, some of it is really raw, but a lot of it is really positive. And I wanted to speak to some of the questions I was being asked. So what was it like for me after the assault? How has it been in relationships? How do I take my story and utilize it in a way that can positively impact society? So those questions didn't have, I didn't have an ability to answer those questions in an hour, whatever time I was allotted during a speaking engagement. And I really wanted to make certain that other survivors didn't feel that they were alone, and also that they didn't feel like they necessarily had to come forward and tell their story. One of the great things about the Me Too movement is it takes away the stigma from the fact that we are all we've all gone through something so difficult. And by taking away that stigma, I think it really encourages people to come forward. But I also wanted people to know that you don't have to. We've all been through a moment where we weren't given a choice, where we weren't in control, and the control is ours. And part of that is to decide whether or not to come forward. That's certainly part of it. And I hope that I can share my story in a way that people can grow and perhaps understand that when we support survivors, when we say, I believe you, when we understand that we all come from a different background, we all have different experiences, and we all require a different level of care, but we all require care and understanding and belief. So I hope people will take that and see what happens when we give that to a survivor, when we test their rape kits, when we believe them, when we eliminate that stigma that makes them feel self-conscious about coming forward. Hopefully, we can have society support every survivor in the same way I was supported. Yeah.
So tell me, Natasha, when after this assault happened, did you have issues, or do you still? I know you just say that you still have, sometimes you feel a mess and you don't really feel like you are necessarily healed or alleviated from those feelings after have being assaulted by this predator. How, with the PTSD that you have experienced, do you still have some effects? And how would you, how I know you've already talked about how you work through it, but how would you recommend other women, and I don't know whether even your roommates had some PTSD, they were living with you at that time.
Right.
So although they did not experience having a relationship with you, they probably went through some of the same kinds. You were traumatized. However, everybody in your space was traumatized because it happened in your personal space.
Absolutely.
were you able to come together with your roommates? Were they able to support you? And do you still live with them? And tell me, how is it now living? I don't know if you live alone or you still live with them. Tell me how it is now.
That's such a great question, because it's certainly, my roommates and I no longer live together. I lived with a man and a woman. My female roommate came and testified against the man that raped me when we caught him. My male roommate was so traumatized he couldn't appear in court. He said that he continues after all these years to have flashbacks of me screaming, and I can certainly understand that, and I know that that's really hard to grasp. But we all process this kind of anxiety in a different way. There's a saying, people say, fight, flight, yes, or freeze. And clearly, perhaps my roommate had the male roommate had a freeze towards it. And certainly, I only stayed with them for another week until my mother, who is under 5 foot, showed up in an enormous U-Haul and said, "Put all your stuff in here. We're going home."
Get in the car.
Yeah, exactly. She's quite a character. But so I left them. But I'll tell you, it's really interesting after all these years. So I've always had a dog. So I had a dog when I was assaulted, and I continue to have a dog, always. And just about 2 years ago, I lost my dog, and it was a while before I adopted another dog. And in those 3 months without a canine companion, which I'd never had, I was an absolute mess. And in fact, my partner found me hiding under a table shaking one day. And this is just 2 years ago, because I guess I hadn't realized that having a dog with me the whole time, I guess, kept my PTSD at bay, so to speak, because perhaps there was like another entity in the room with me that would like alert me. So my brain was like, "You're okay." And when all of a sudden there was no other dog, it was like, "Hold on, you don't have that protection." I mean, I'm just getting goosebumps thinking about that moment. I literally hid under the table. I was just suddenly just so fearful. Wow. All those years later. I do have a dog again now, though. Okay. So no more I haven't hidden under a table in a while.
and you still meet with the support group and the ladies that also have been. Tell me about when we were talking a little bit about how going forward, how can we and the listening audience get your book and contact you, the resources that you have and or your book to read it so they can hear your story? I'm really fortunate. I found a great home with Amazon Publishing, so you can go on Amazon and purchase a book. My website is natashasjusticeproject.org. There are resources on there. Again, if you've listened to this and perhaps it's stirring up some emotions, that is okay. If you feel that way, there are so many great resources out there, and really survivors out there. I really try to make an effort to respond to everyone out there who emails me. So certainly, I welcome your emails. And I may not be able to offer professional support, but I'm certainly, as another survivor, there. And to everyone who's kind of stuck around with this interview, I'm just really grateful you shared this journey with me, and to you, thank you so much for having me. Oh, it was a pleasure having you and hearing your story, and all the best health and healing and love in your life.
Oh, thank you.
From
You
this
too.
point on, and yes, thank you for sharing. So you're listening to Your Family's Health, and we listened to Natasha and her story. Thanks for joining us. Until next time.